The sky was once their ally. Monkeys lounged across the highest treetops of Barro Colorado Island, exposing their full bellies under the sunlight. For 85 years, they ruled this ecosystem with blind arrogance. They ate, slept, and reproduced without concern, believing this world had been made to serve them. But from the darkness of the forest canopy, a pair of black eyes as large as human eyes was locking onto a target, a 9-kilogram biological machine, armed with talons comparable to those of a grizzly bear, was diving downward at 80 kilometers per hour without making a single sound. The soft mass of flesh sitting on that branch did not even know it was about to die. In 1999, to save a forest that was dying from the greed of monkeys, scientists released 2 giant Harpy Eagles onto this island. They triggered one of the most terrifying bloodbaths ever recorded in evolutionary history. Our story begins with a massive human mistake. In 1914, American engineers completed the Panama Canal. To do that, they dammed a major river. Water levels rose quickly, drowning entire valleys and vast areas of rainforest. But the highest hilltop survived, rising above the artificial lake. Almost overnight, a 1,500-hectare stretch of rainforest was completely cut off from the mainland. It became an island by accident. Today, it is called Barro Colorado Island, or simply BCI. Because it was completely surrounded by water, the animals trapped on this hilltop could not leave. The Smithsonian Institution recognized how unique this place was, so in 1923, it turned the island into a strictly protected nature reserve. For the next century, scientists observed, recorded, and studied every leaf, every insect, and every animal on this island. But there was a huge dark side behind this isolation. Apex predators such as jaguars, pumas, and giant eagles need extremely large territories to survive. A 1,500-hectare island was simply not large enough for them. So, one by one, these large killers starved, swam away, or disappeared. Without predators, prey animals on the island began to explode. BCI became crowded with monkeys. 5 different species, including howler monkeys, spider monkeys, and capuchins, experienced population booms. For almost a century, these monkeys lived in extreme luxury. They spent their time sunbathing at the very tops of the trees, the most exposed and dangerous place in a normal forest. But here, they did not even bother to look up. They had no alarm calls for threats from the sky. Their cultural memory of danger had been completely erased from their brains. They had reached a state of predator naivety, meaning they had literally forgotten that monsters existed. But this monkey utopia was destroying the island. With thousands of monkeys eating everything in sight, the forest could not regenerate. They consumed the seeds. They raided bird nests. The towering old trees still stood, but there were no young seedlings waiting to replace them. The forest was not dying loudly, it was aging in absolute silence. Scientists knew they had to fix this. The island needed a villain. And they knew exactly who to call. If you wanted to design the perfect biological weapon for killing a monkey, you would design the Harpy Eagle. Named after the terrifying half-woman, half-bird monsters of Greek mythology, this bird is the physical form of a nightmare. A female Harpy Eagle can weigh more than 9 kilograms. Its wingspan is nearly 2 meters. But the most frightening part is its feet. Its talons are as large as human fingers, powered by a crushing grip comparable to the bite of a brown bear. It does not soar high in open skies like ordinary eagles. It was born for the tight, suffocating spaces of the rainforest. It flies at 80 kilometers per hour, weaving through dense branches, using owl-like facial feathers to hear the smallest rustle of a leaf. But Harpy Eagles were disappearing in the wild. So scientists began breeding them in captivity. Raising just one Harpy Eagle in a laboratory is almost absurdly expensive. To help one chick survive through a breeding season, scientists must feed it 6,000 mice, hundreds of live rats, 800 rabbits, and dozens of frozen calves. It costs a fortune. But in the wild, a harpy eagle costs nothing. It simply hunts. Scientists selected 2 young captive-born eagles for this ultimate experiment. One was a male named Guardia, and the other was a larger, more aggressive female named Esperanza. Neither had ever hunted a wild animal in its life. Everything they had ever eaten had been handed to them by humans. In the summer of 1999, the scientists brought these 2 pampered, hand-fed eagles to the island, opened the cages, and stepped back. Before opening the doors, the scientists had calculated the numbers. They predicted the eagles might kill around 30 or 40 monkeys in the first year, just enough to restore balance. But nature does not care about human math. For the first few days, the eagles only explored. But on the 4th day, blood began to spill. However, the eagles did not target monkeys first. They targeted the easiest prey, sloths. Sloths on this island were everywhere, moving in slow motion, completely unaware of the sky. More than half of the eagles' first prey were simply sloths lifted from branches with ease. But before long, the eagles realized there was an even greater buffet waiting for them: the monkeys. When the eagles first swooped near the monkeys, the primates did not run. They actually just sat there. Some even came closer out of curiosity, trying to figure out what this strange giant bird was. They had no alarm call, no instinct to hide. They were moving targets. And then, the massacre began. Esperanza and Guardia were killing machines. Instead of hunting once every few days, they hunted almost every day. Scientists were horrified as the number of carcasses rose sharply. Within only a few weeks, the count did not stop at 10 or 20 monkeys. The data shot off every chart. Then things became strange. Researchers realized the eagles were engaging in a behavior known as surplus killing. The eagles would grab a tiny tamarin weighing less than half a kilogram prey that did not even provide enough calories to repay the energy spent hunting it. But they would not eat it. Researchers found monkey bodies thrown beneath trees, completely intact. The eagles were literally playing with their food. These captive raised birds were using live monkeys as target practice to train their hunting skills in the wild. Entire monkey groups began to disappear. The most vulnerable generations, infants and old monkeys, were removed first. Spider monkeys completely abandoned daylight and became nocturnal just to survive. In the scientific community, researchers had a term for what was happening to the island. They called it the landscape of fear. Before the eagles, every tree was a playground. Now, the island was a war zone. The sunny, beautiful upper canopy had become a death zone. Gaps between tree trunks became ambush corridors. The only safe place was the dark, muddy forest floor. Fear was no longer just an emotion. It had become a physical property of geography. Let me ask you a quick question. If you were a scientist watching this absolute massacre unfold, would you intervene and stop it to save the monkeys, or would you let nature carry out its brutal process to save the forest? Tell me in the comments, because this exact debate nearly tore the scientific community apart at the time. The monkeys were dying fast. The eagles were winning. But remember, monkeys are primates. They are extremely intelligent, and they were about to prove that evolution does not always take thousands of years. Sometimes, it happens in just a few weeks. If you push an animal into a corner, it will either adapt or die. The monkeys on Barro Colorado Island chose to adapt. By the 9th month, researchers noticed something extremely strange. The capuchin monkeys, the smartest species on the island, began stalking the scientists. Wherever researchers walked through the forest, entire capuchin groups followed them, keeping an exact distance of 10 to 15 meters. At first, humans thought the monkeys were only curious. But then they realized the truth. The monkeys were not looking at the humans. They were looking up at the sky. The Capuchins had quickly realized that Harpy Eagles were afraid of humans and would never attack when people were nearby. So these tiny geniuses began using the scientists as literal living shields. They turned human presence into a moving safety zone. No one in the scientific community had predicted that prey animals would use researchers as a tactical defense mechanism. But the howler monkeys went one step further. They did not only change their behavior, they began changing their own genetic future. Howler monkeys are famous for being the loudest animals in the Americas. Their calls can travel for miles. But making loud noise when a giant eagle is hunting you is a terrible idea. The eagles quickly took down the loudest and most aggressive monkeys. So, what happened? The quieter monkeys survived, and within a single generation, the entire howler monkey population on the island became significantly quieter. Silence itself was being selected by natural selection in real time. Not only that, they also invented an entirely new language. Within only a few months, the howler monkeys created a brand new alarm call, extremely specific, with only one meaning: Harpy Eagle. If it was a parrot, they ignored it. If it was an airplane, they did not care. But the moment the eagle's signal sounded, this new vocabulary was activated, and the entire monkey group vanished into the densest layer of the forest like a magic trick. The monkeys had passed the ultimate test. They had remembered how to survive. And because the monkeys were now living in fear and hiding in the shadows, they stopped eating every seed. They stopped raiding bird nests. For the first time in 80 years, rare birds began hatching chicks again. Sunlight reached the forest floor, and the old trees finally began producing young seedlings. The island was healing. By August 2000, the experiment had exceeded every measure of success. The monkey population stabilized at 60% of its previous level. The eagles were thriving. But behind closed doors, a major battle was breaking out inside the Smithsonian Institution. An ethics council divided into two sharply opposed sides. The opposing side criticized the project as being no different from a bloody Roman arena where monkeys were trapped inside an invisible cage with no escape, used as entertainment for monsters. Meanwhile, the supporting side defended a practical view: nature is indifferent, and the lives of a few monkey groups were a small price to pay for the revival of an entire ecosystem. The vote split 50-50. In the end, they decided to stop the project. But not because the experiment had failed. It was because they realized a harsh truth about island ecology. The island was simply too small. There was no buffer zone where the monkeys could escape when pressure became too high. If the eagles stayed there forever, they could eventually push the monkeys to local extinction, and then the eagles themselves would starve. Esperanza and Guardia were captured again and transferred to other conservation programs. Their newly hatched chicks were safely moved back to the mainland. The predators were gone. But this is the most astonishing part of the entire story. Months after the eagles were removed, researchers returned to test the monkeys. You might think that once the monsters were gone, the monkeys would go back to sunbathing at the tops of the trees. They did not. When researchers played the sound of a harpy eagle through a hidden speaker, the howler monkeys immediately panicked, used their new alarm call, and rushed straight into dense vegetation. The eagles had left, but the fear remained. Esperanza and Guardia did not only hunt monkeys. They reprogrammed the psychology of an entire island. The event on BC I was not only a scientific milestone. In our analysis, it completely rewrote the strategy book of global wildlife conservation. Look at another classic example: when the United States decided to release wolves back into Yellowstone National Park, they had to compare it directly with the lesson from this monkey island. Experts realized that to return an apex killer to nature, the space must be large enough for the survival battle to unfold fairly, avoiding a repeat of local extinction. Viewed more deeply, this story leaves behind a brutally harsh philosophy: nature does not tolerate weakness, and it does not forgive imbalance. The revival of an ecosystem sometimes does not come from gentle efforts, but must be paid for with blood and fear. If you held the power of life and death in your hands, would you have the courage to release a monster into nature just to save a forest? And in your opinion, which killer in the animal kingdom is truly the most terrifying nightmare? Share your perspective below, and I will see you again in the next journeys decoding the natural world.